absolutely free. Just search.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. And for our third segment of the day, we're going to be talking about an interesting generational talent coming from Japan on over to the MLB that could really swing the momentum of the entire free agency cycle firmly in the direction of one of the contenders we talked about, or a team usually not in these kind of free agency sweepstakes that could build momentum with his signing. I'm talking about Roki Sasaki, the Japanese pitcher who is really looking to be a premier signing for any team that's looking to sign him on the dotted line. Or looking for him to sign on the dotted line, rather. I messed up the whole thing there, but let's look into Roki Sasaki first and foremost and what makes him so appealing to a lot of MLB teams. First of all, let's talk about his tenure in Japan. With the Chiba Lotte Marines, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, he had a 2.10 ERA, just 88 walks and 394 and 2/3 innings, 505 strikeouts in that same amount of time. So as you can see, he really has gained a lot of respect, not just internationally, but in the MLB as well, and it's really caught the eye of a lot of teams. And then, when we hear all these scouting reports coming from these MLB teams, they really like his ability in terms of his velocity, the shape he puts on the ball, the spin he gets. His fastball is in the regions of 100 miles per hour, and a lot of teams really appreciate his ability to pitch inside. I was reading a report before the show from a Dodgers scout who's looking into signing Sasaki, and they're one of the teams firmly in the race for his signature. I was talking about his ability to work inside. But there is one problem that a lot of teams are going to have to really compensate for in signing his signature. But it's that he is going to be someone who wants to go deep into games. He wants to be a 7th inning, 8th inning kind of pitcher. And it's really not going to work in today's MLB landscape when pitchers are getting the axe within, say, 4 to 5 innings. So Roki Sasaki truly does want to be, quote-unquote, the face of the franchise. And of all the 20 teams that he's talked to, I feel like only 7 will allow him to be. But even those 7, amongst those 7, there are still some pratfalls that need to be overcome should they really go in on trying to sign him. And so let's talk about how Roki Sasaki profiles in the MLB first and foremost, and then look at all of the teams in terms of the sweepstakes for his signature. So, Roki Sasaki is an interesting case here, right? With all these Japanese international players, what have you, coming abroad, Roki Sasaki is perhaps the most interesting case because unlike a lot of these Japanese players, he is someone who circumvents certain standards because I don't necessarily know how to describe it because I just read it. He is someone who would fulfill the international player pool for a certain team should they sign him. But since he did not play 6 or more years in that professional league, he will be a little bit cheaper. And because of his youth, he's 25 years old, he would also be more appealing to small market teams because he's not like someone who command a lot of money like Yamamoto or a Shohei Ohtani. Some say that his contract could reach into those regions, more Yamamoto than Shohei's most recent contract, so to speak. But because of that, it is a very intriguing case study of who could be in on his signature. So let's talk about the 7 or so teams, whether they be teams that are really looking to contend, former World Series champions, so to speak, or those small market teams who could be more appealing in terms of contract size. So, of all the 8 or 7 teams that a lot of these scouts, a lot of these reports are coming out with saying, of these 7 or 8 teams, I feel like 3 are really appealing in terms of these small market teams wanting to sign him. But let's talk about the 7 teams first and foremost. So, the 7 teams that he feels most strongly about at this current moment in time. The LA Dodgers, we just talked about. The San Diego Padres, a team we're going to be talking about a lot when it comes to Sasaki. The Texas Rangers could be an interesting team. Then the Yankees, Mets, we also talked about, and the Cubs and the Giants. So those are the 7 teams who are expected to be firmly in the discussions for Roki Sasaki's signature. So Let's talk about each of them. Let's start off with the big guns first. Let's talk about the Yankees, Dodgers, and Mets. Well, we already saw the Yankees sign a lefty. Roki Sasaki's a righty, so I don't necessarily think that will fit in the balance of the rotation. So I do think that even though it will be a nice little addition to an already impressive offseason for the New York Yankees, I don't necessarily think it would be anything special. It would just be adding surplus to what they already have. Then let's talk about the Dodgers as well. Really didn't do much after signing Blake Snell on the pitching front, but look at the depth and talent of this LA Dodgers pitching rotation. You have three of the best Japanese aces if they do end up signing Sasaki, and you already have Blake Snell. You could potentially have another full season of Clayton Kershaw should he come back healthy. You have two young guys still in Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May. We've already talked about this. They would be overwhelmingly loaded at the starting pitching spot. And then Tap to Learn comes into the comments, when are we expecting this to be done? I'm not completely certain. I feel like it's going to get done a little bit closer to the end of the deadline for free agency. I don't necessarily see this being done within the next couple of weeks or within the month, so to speak. I do think this will be dragged out a little bit. I think he's exploring and weighing all his options. And like I said, because of the whole contract situation and what that means for smaller market teams, that means they'll be in this race for as long as possible. This could be about the waiting game for a lot of these teams. So I can't really tell you a specific deadline for his signature for all of these teams, but I do think we'll come a little bit closer towards the end of free agency. But let's get back into these teams. So we've already nixed the Yankees and the Dodgers. Now we're getting into teams who I think can work. The Mets, I can see this working a little bit more than the Dodgers and the Yankees, but again, I feel like you've invested a lot in guys like Manaea, signing Montes, and really developing guys like Peterson. We haven't really seen Blackburn play for them at all, but I can see this being a justifiable signing for this rotation. I think it will be a statement of intent from Steve Cohen in terms of not just investing in building the best batting lineup, but also a stellar pitching rotation. So I can see this work, but not necessarily as much as certain teams. Now let's talk about the Texas Rangers, because this is an interesting case study here. They already did this with Yu Darvish many years ago, and as a Texas Rangers fan, I remember that fondly until, he had all those injury issues and then he left without a championship to his name. But in this situation, I do feel like it could work, but I do think when this Texas Rangers pitching staff is healthy, it is one of the best in the league. You have Jacob deGrom, you have Nathan Eovaldi back, you have Tyler Mahle, yes, he's aging a little bit, you have John Gray, a lot of innings eaters, and Roki Sasaki could help compensate for all the injuries and also the youth at the back end, with guys like Leiter and Rocker coming in to this staff. But ultimately, I don't necessarily think that when fully healthy and firing on all cylinders, the Texas Rangers pitching staff will need someone of Sasaki's ilk. Now let's get into the top three candidates in my mind. The Cubs, the Giants, and the Padres. And it's interesting that I think all these small market teams have more of a chance than, say, a Dodgers or a Yankees, but I do think they would be more appealing to Sasaki, because even though teams such as them might not want him going more than 7 innings, A, they're small market teams, so they'll take all the innings they can get, and B, he would immediately be perhaps the number one ace on this roster as soon as he walks their doors. So let's talk about the Cubs a little bit, because I think they ultimately are the most appealing destination. They already have a Japanese ace on their roster in Shota Imanaga. I believe they still have Justin Steele, who's appealing. Javier Assad had a decent season last year, but ultimately they don't really have a generational talent. They have a lot of innings eaters. They have solid guys, but not elite guys at the pitching position. So Roki Sasaki can immediately come in and cement himself as the ace in Chicago. Then, same thing with the Giants. They're not necessarily known for their pitching prowess. They have a guy in Logan Webb who probably would still be the number one guy, even if Roki Sasaki signs. As Anthony Manzano says, I'm predicting this. Roki goes to the Dodgers, and then the Dodgers trade for Sandy from Miami. Okay, that's a little bit too indulgent there from the Dodgers. If they pick up both Sandy Alcantara and Roki Sasaki, their pitching staff would be insane, but who knows? The Dodgers are the Dodgers, and they've already had one of the better off seasons in this free agency cycle. So why not? But I still think that small market teams could be appealing here, and they're very much still in this thing, but I appreciate the comment because it would be ridiculous to think about a pitching rotation that had three of the best Japanese pitchers, Clayton Kershaw, Blake Snell, Sandy Alcantara, Tony Gonsolin, and Dustin May. It would be completely ridiculous and ludicrous to think about it, and thank you for putting that thought in my mind, but I just cannot see it in my mind. It would just be too overpowering on every single front. Let's talk about why a team like the Giants could be a little more appealing, even though they are one of the Dodgers' closest rivals. I do think they need at least one more high-profile pitcher. They have Webb, they have Robbie Ray, but I do need someone who's a little bit more high-profile and can be more of an innings eater, and thus that's why Roki could appeal to a Giants team that really doesn't do these many high-profile signings. And then San Diego, they haven't really had a high-profile pitching signing. They've had their share of fascinating signings over the years and high-profile ones to get to where they are in terms of contention status. But I do think that this San Diego Padres team is appealing because they do have an aging pitching staff. They do have a pitching staff that is on its final legs in terms of contract expiries. Dylan Cease's contract is expiring. I'm now blanking on names, but a lot of players in this lineup is signing. Michael King's final year is coming up in terms of his contract expiry. But I do think the San Diego Padres would be stating their intent to build as well rotational depth as well as a batting lineup that is one of the most potent in all of MLB. So if Roki signs there, I do think that would be a great decision because it would be a younger look for them. It would be one where you can tie him down for X amount of years and not have to worry. As Anthony's honestly been saying this, my dark horse for Roki, I think he shocks everybody and goes to Seattle to revitalize that franchise. I can see it, even though I really like what Seattle is building through their pitching staff. They don't really have one high-profile name they can lean on. So I do like this, and I do, even as a Texas Rangers fan, appreciate that comment because it's a team that could very well sneak up on everyone and say, hey, we're building a nice, young rotation staff and we want to make a high profile signing, so why not? But I do feel that out of all the teams on this current list, San Diego is a destination for him. Let me continue to know what you think in the comments. But coming up next, we're going to be talking about two of the AFC's elite and some hypothetical reasons as to why both of them can win the Super Bowl this season, starting off with a team going for a historic three-peat, the Kansas City Chiefs. You definitely don't want to miss it after this short break.